Alright, so we're gonna make goulash. I've never made goulash before. So how we're gonna do it is we're gonna do it based on what I've seen and what I think would work best. So first steps first, get yourself some nice bacon, cut it into, small chunks. Of course, it's gonna reduce quite a lot in size once it cooks because there's just so much fat, right? If you can get your bacon thicker than this, get it thicker than this. This is my kind of all-purpose bacon that I get at the butcher. Because I use it for everything, it's not necessarily the biggest it could be, but get yourself some bacon. Then, that bacon, just cut it into it doesn't really matter how big the pieces are. So I'm making a full pork goulash, but you can easily make this with beef and omit the bacon. So in a cold container, just shove all your bacon. I'm gonna render this until it's crispy and all its fat has rendered, and we'll remove it from here and continue forward. So I'm just gonna turn on the heat and let it to medium, and I'm gonna let it render. There's so much fat in bacon that you can do this easily and it won't be a problem. Next up, I have I have a big hunk of pork shoulder. So the reason I'm doing an all pork goulash is really simple. I had a bunch of pork stock that I wanted to get rid of, so I'm gonna make pork goulash. It's gonna be all pork. Pork stock, pork meat, and pork pork bacon. If I worked with the pork bones more, I would know where it is, but here's the bone, here are the chunks. Just separate, cut into large chunks. Keep in mind, of course, that it will shrink a lot, especially because there's so much fat in pork shoulder or pork butt. Pork shoulder, pork butt's the same thing. I believe the reason it's the same thing, and it's just two different names for it, is that back in the day, you put the butt of the gun on your shoulder. So I said I don't mind the skin, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the skin. I'm going to put it in, but I'm not going, but then I'll pull it out the same way I'm using the bones to do that. Anyway, so we cut our pork into pork chunks and pork scraps, the skin and the bones. So we're gonna set this aside. Now that we're done cutting the meat, we're gonna clean ourselves. Next up, get yourself some sexy vegetables. So I got garlic, onions. I'm not gonna use all of these. I have a bunch of nice red peppers. I have 2 really sexy heirloom tomatoes, and then I have a few carrots. So what we're gonna do with our vegetables is we're going to process some of them now to make a flavor base, and then we're gonna process some later to make to have vegetables in our stew. So I'm gonna use all the greens. Just gonna roughly, coarsely chop them, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put them in a food processor to blitz them into small pieces. That way I can really nicely brown and caramelize them. So, you don't have to be too crazy. Just keep in mind that if your food processor is kind of weak, you might need to cut it smaller so it can process everything more easily. Next are tomatoes. Oh my god. Oh, you can smell the vine. It smells so good. So I'm gonna take it. Oh my god. When I said sexy tomatoes, I meant it. I mean, if you don't have sexy tomatoes, you know, just use any tomato that you like the taste of, and add a bit of tomato paste. But I'm gonna do everything. Bacon's rendering nicely. I'm gonna cook this in the oven to get even surface browning and everything. So I put my oven to 325. Oh my god, these tomatoes! You don't even need to put salt on them. They're so delicious. So the rest of the tomato I'm gonna use later alongside the rest of the red peppers. Next, you want to cut a few carrots. I have a small food processor, so this is gonna be a lot, but it doesn't need to be like super perfect. Onion, same thing. Don't need to go too crazy. And you know, if you don't have a food processor or anything, just cut it as finely as you can manage. So we'll start with this, and I'll see where that gets us. Oh yeah, definitely we'll have to do this in multiple batches. Let's see. Oh yeah, see how it's all small chunks? That's what you want. So we're just gonna repeat, you know, rinse and repeat, doing small chunks like this. Like a pretty much like you almost want to do like a full-on, you know, puree. And you know, there's gonna be a bunch of liquid. That's not a problem. All the liquid is gonna cook, and it's gonna evaporate and develop a lot of flavor. Like everything that's watery is gonna evaporate, and everything that's like flavor is gonna brown and develop and get tasty. So, oh yeah, my bacon's like pretty much there. It's crispy. There's a bunch of bacon fat at the bottom. So our last round of blitzing. The reason, that's why I always do stews at, you know, when I do recipe videos, I almost always do stews or soups or things like that. It's because I don't have to be super precise with like cooking techniques. I can just show really like, you know, the process behind it. So look at all of this juice and all of this, you know, vegetable pulp. That's gonna be our flavor base. I'm gonna drain I'm gonna take all the bacon from the pan, and I'm gonna put it aside. But if you're lazy and don't want to do it, you don't have to, because you can. All the water from the vegetables will prevent the bacon from overcooking. Because pretty much like the idea is that, you know, when something has water in it, the temperature will never go above the boiling point, because the water as it boils will. I'm not exactly 100% sure of like the reaction, but the water as it boils, you know, it cools stuff down. You know, it's the same reason that like when you sweat you cool down. It's because of the evaporative cooling, right? So since it'll never go above boiling temp, you can. So I put my bacon aside. Since it never goes above boiling temp, you know, it'll never burn. And I'm gonna cook it. If you want, before this step, you could brown your pork chunks. I'm not going to, but it's definitely something you can do. I think, you know, cooking the pork chunks will definitely improve flavor. It'll develop more brown flavors, but I'm gonna, especially if you want to boil, you want to cook this on the stove instead of cooking in the oven. But since I'm gonna cook it in the oven, personally, I don't think it's necessary to, because you're just gonna develop so much brown flavors anyways, and I'm gonna develop a shit ton of brown flavors in here. Part of my language. So I'm gonna hit this with some salt, even though there's a salt in the bacon fat, because you want to draw out moisture. We want to get out as much moisture as we can from this particularly. So you just want to look over this and let it cook out all of its moisture. So right now it's like, if you listen, it's sputtering, which means it's still boiling, which means liquid is evaporating. Eventually it'll start crackling because all the oil that's in there will start frying up the vegetables. So that's what we're looking for. You know, for a vegetable stock, you could keep your tomatoes, you could keep your peppers, but if you want to do more like, you know, meat stocks, I would only keep the onions and the carrots. Tomatoes are full of umami, so to do like a vegetable broth, tomatoes are really useful because you'll get a lot of umami from that. So I have 2 fat cloves here. It grows so easily. Like, if you start growing your own garlic, you know, it's you'll never run out provided you do it properly. You know, provided you keep enough garlic to replant at the end of when it starts again, and provided you grow enough garlic that in summer you in winter and fall you have your garlic for like the entire year. So, you know, garlic is just like any other allium. You know, it's like you can kind of chop it like an onion. So that's one way to like finely dice the garlic. You know, if you got a garlic press, if you have a garlic press, use a garlic press. But you can also just do it like this. This one I'm going to keep in kind of large chunks. Add it to our boiling, steaming mixture of watery vegetables. So I'll show you what it looks like right now. You know, it's pretty much like soup, you know, it's all liquid and stuff. You'll be able to, you'll see, you know, as I cook it down, it'll really dry out. So right now, you know, draw out all the moisture. You can see all the vapor too. That's how you know there's still a bunch of water in there. And I'll show you, when I come back, I'll show you, it'll be super dry. So I just wanted to show you, this is the kind of stuff I keep for stocks and stews. You know, I got garlic skins, onion skins, garlic stems, carrots, a bit of like green onions that were gonna go bad, shallots that were gonna go bad. That's the kind of stuff I keep. Another thing I want to show you is, you know, it's already a lot less liquid than before. You can see it's kind of more pasty now, but there's still a bunch of steam coming out, and you can hear, you know, it's not crackling yet, so it's not ready yet. Something else I wanted to show was, oh yeah, paprika. So I'm using Hungarian paprika. Like, it's gonna be, this is the only nice brand of Hungarian paprika I could find, but I'm sure there's others, you know. And I'm also gonna use some Spanish paprika. This is a smoked Spanish paprika. So I'm gonna use a mix of these 2 paprikas. They're both sweet paprikas, so they're not spicy. So I might add, you know, some sort of spicy element to them. We'll see how I feel. I like spicy in my food. The cats are fighting, but I think they're okay. Like, you know, when no. So, but when the time comes, I just mean like when we're gonna start, like, you know, stewing the last step after the meat's tender, just so that like we can get some veggies in there. I just want to chop them into bite-sized pieces, you know, nothing crazy. That way, when you eat it, it'll be it'll fit in a spoon, and it'll fit in your mouth, and it'll be nice. So, what vegetables do I want? I want carrots, which are going to be I want root vegetables pretty much. So carrots, you know, onions, potatoes. If you have parsnips, use parsnips. You got radishes, use radishes. You know, you got celeriac, use celeriac. You know, like use root vegetables, hearty vegetables. And you know, since I have leftover tomato, I'm also going to use the pieces of the leftover tomato. So it was starting to smell very brown, and as you can see, there's fond at the bottom, which means it's nearly ready. So I took it off the heat. So what are we going to do now? We're going to use the heat and all the oil that's in here to toast our spices. What spices do we want? Black pepper. We're going to do 1.5 tablespoons of smoked paprika, and we're going to do even more Hungarian paprika. Paprika should be like your main spice in this. Oh my god, it smells so good. It smells like floral, sweet. a bit smoky. It smells peppery, fruity. It's a really glorious smell. Just a little bit, just a tiny bit of caraway. Not too much because this caraway is a very strong spice, and this should be, you know, mostly paprika forward. Yeah, we're gonna add a bit of dry thyme, 2 bay leaves. I put a tiny bit of four spice being, you know, the colonial spices. Just a tiny bit. This is gonna be very strong. So if you had garlic powder and onion powder, you should put some. But since I didn't put any. Smells really delightful right now. I might add a bit more paprika, honestly. Paprika is a really wonderful spice. I think that's gonna be plenty. So right now I'm using, since I closed the heat and the vegetables still have a tiny bit of moisture in them, they're releasing whatever moisture is left. And what that means is that I'm able to deglaze the pan at the bottom, all that delicious crispy goodness. So this is like a really awesome, you know, thick, nicely caramelized flavor bomb of a base. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna add stock. This is pork stock, since the entire point of this all pork, you know, the entire point of this all pork goulash is that I was gonna use my pork stock. So then, now, here comes the other step. That's like, I guess, this is like choose your destiny, you know, like in Mortal Kombat. Choose your destiny is, do you want to make this more of a stew, or do you want to make this more of a soup? From what I know, traditional goulash is soup. But a lot of people eat it as stew. I'm going to put my meat, you know, uncooked in here, because we're going to develop so much brown flavors by cooking it in the oven anyways. With the bone, with the skin and the bone we'll discard at the end. So right now this is very thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add more broth, because it's going to reduce. So because we're going to cook this like 2.5 to 3 hours until the pork's very tender. So I'm going to add a bunch more stock to this. So I think, just making sure I get all the browned bits. So, you know, this texture right now, it'd be nice for a stew. So we know it's going to reduce, so we're going to put even more broth. Because, you know, if the texture is nice right now for a stew, that means that it'll be too thick once it reduces. And we can always add more liquid later, but I'd rather add the liquid now. That way we get more of the liquid itself browning and developing flavor and reducing. I might just add everything in the... Yeah, I'm gonna add everything. And now it's like soup textured. So if it reduces into a stew, that'll be nice. And if it's doesn't reduce as much as I expected to, and it still stays kind of soupy, then it's gonna be nice too. Oh yeah, don't forget the bacon. So I should have tasted for seasoning before adding the raw pork, because now if I taste it, I'll get, you know, food poisoning or something. But it should be fine, you know. Like, you can always adjust later after it's cooked for a while, because anyways, the pork is gonna release a lot of its juices and a lot of its flavors, so we want to see afterwards and adjust. I'm gonna put this with a lid into the oven, but we're gonna leave the lid. Everything fell down. We're gonna leave the lid, you know, like this. So there's some evaporation, so there's some browning going on in there. As far as the vegetables go, you know, I cut my carrots into bite-sized pieces. I'm gonna cut my onions into bite-sized pieces. I cut my tomatoes into bite-sized pieces. I'm gonna cut my peppers into bite-sized pieces. And I'm gonna add it all after like 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. Then we'll let it cook maybe 30 minutes more. It's been about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half, and you can really see like all around there's that nice like caramelization going. And you want to kind of bring it back into the stew, so you just kind of scrape like this. And at the surface too, you can see the difference between the bottom and the surface I saw like brown, and then you want to mix it back into your stew, and then a new layer of like brown flavors develop. One thing I did for this is I increased my oven to 350 for the last like 30 or so minutes I'm gonna do this. And all that's left to do is add our vegetables. So you add, yeah, the tomatoes, the peppers, the carrots. I would probably add, you know, potatoes too, but I didn't cut them yet, and I'm in my pajamas. What? Coast, don't do that. No. Get away, get away, get away, get away, get away. So maybe I'll just eat it with like potatoes on the side, you know, mashed potatoes or roast potatoes, something like that. Probably roast potatoes. Taste for seasoning, which I'm gonna do right now. Yeah, that's my oven saying 350 is ready. It's really good. I think maybe it's missing some salt, but I'll add it at the very end after it's reduced even more. Because right now, like, you know, it hasn't fully reduced, and since I'm gonna put it fully uncovered at 350, it'll reduce even more quickly than before. So I'll taste it after it's reduced, and we'll see what happens. So for now, that's it, and I'll be back in 30 minutes. So I'm willing to say that the goulash is done. Now you could eat this right now. If you want it thicker, you can reduce it, so you can kind of, but you think it's like pretty much ready, so instead of like slowly reducing it in the oven, what you do is you like boil it. So you could boil it to reduce it, to get it more stew-like. You could also add a bit of roux to it, or like a cornstarch slurry or something, and it would make it thicker. Another way to make it thicker is to add starchy potatoes like russet potatoes earlier, and then they're kind of gonna give their, you know, they're gonna give their starch into it, and it's gonna make it thicker as well. If you're not particularly fussy about the thickness, you don't have to do anything. I made it a bit more soupy, but it's because I like it kind of soupy, you know, like it's still thick, but it has like a good amount of liquid. Of course, you know, taste it, make sure it's got enough salt, enough paprika, make sure it's got enough complexity. If you want the more kind of florality to come out, you can add some vinegar or some lemon juice, or you know, something like that, and it'll give it a bit of brightness, which is gonna help like the floral aspect of the paprika and the peppers to come out. I think it's delicious the way it is, and I'm not gonna eat it. I'm going to let it cool down, all of this like this in my fridge. So first I'm gonna let it cool down to room temp, because I don't want to, you know, burn my fridge. So I'm gonna let it cool down to room temp, and then once it's room temp, I'm gonna put it in the fridge and let it cool down entirely, and I'm gonna eat it tomorrow. If what you could also do is you could just jar it up into jars of, like, you know, like deli containers or whatever, or like Tupperwares, and you can put away all the ones that you're not gonna eat, let them freeze, because this freezes super well, and then only keep the Tupperwares that you want to eat like soon. That way they'll cool down, and you know, they'll get ready to be eaten the next day, or whenever you want to eat them. The one thing you should do though, and the other reason too, is that when I let it cool down is because I want to remove the bones and the pieces of skin, and it'll be much easier to do once it's cold, because then I'll just be able to pick it up with my hands. So yeah, the goulash is done. I think you know, that's about it. You know, I've shown you how to make goulash. Oh, I've shown you how to make goulash, and you know, I'm stocking up for the winter.